Good morning, everyone, and it's our absolute pleasure to be sharing our journey with you. As Paul mentioned, joined by my colleague Mike and also by Tim Geiler. And Tim, we're particularly grateful for you giving up your time this morning, particularly with the rollout of the vaccine just starting. Thank you. And we're also joined by Professor Nigel Wright, Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Enterprise. And Nigel, if we ask any difficult questions, or if you ask difficult questions, I'm sure Nigel will help to support us with the answers of those. I'm going to hand over to Mike in just a second, because although Universities for Nottingham is part of my portfolio, Mike led the early stage work that led to the formation of the civic agreement. So he's going to take us through some of those early stage examples before handing back to me. Thank you, Mike.
Paul, if we can move the slide on.
Okay.
So again, good morning, everybody. Mike Carr, Dean of Enterprise here at the university, and I, as Fiona has said, led on the ops side of the first phase. This is very much done in collaboration with the University of Nottingham. You can see both our logos on this slide. And I was working with Alex Favier. I know quite a number of you know Alex, and he's been a very big supporter of this network. Basically, this slide says why we did it, and really there are three main drivers of this activity. One, actually both VCs wanted to do it, and both VCs could see a win-win. And you can see some words from them on this slide, which actually built into the forward of our civic agreement. Second driver was we wanted to do it beyond just Nottingham as a city. Nottingham is quite underbounded as a city, and we have great interest in the development of the county as a whole. So it was really important to us that we both saw the city and the county as part of our civic agreement. I have to be honest, the politics have not always been very straight here. That hasn't always worked for the benefit of this geographic area, and we were hoping that the civic agreement would help towards developing our thoughts in terms of how this area would work better together. And then lastly, we wanted to involve more than just the universities and the local authorities, and you can see that we built a core partnership around the institutions listed at the bottom of the slide. This took a little while to develop, and by no means represents the strength or scale of the partnership we have, but it is the group that is overseeing the main activity that we have laid out in our civic agreement. You need to recognise there's a large number, hundreds of other organisations potentially involved in our work, not mentioned on this slide. If you could move the slide on, please. So I'm going to just quickly talk through the three phases that built up to the agreement. The first one was that we felt we needed to form a platform. We very much recognised that we knew each other quite well as institutions, but we didn't really record well what we'd been doing together and jointly. And I think it's fair to say a learning point was it was helpful that somebody like myself had worked for both institutions. So actually I had good relationships with a lot of people at a relatively senior level within the University of Nottingham. We commissioned a joint economic, social and cultural impact study. Both the universities started at different phases in that work, and we wanted to jointly present what we felt was our contribution to the local area and beyond. You can see the outcome of that survey, which I think was very innovative in the way we did it, at the website as mentioned on this slide. Secondly, we looked at actually taking somebody independently and deciding, getting them to tell us by meeting a lot of our people what we were doing well together and where there was potential. And I think the helpful thing that came out of that was, probably not unsurprisingly, when you looked for it, we as institutions were doing an enormous amount of work together. Often, I might argue, covertly, in the sense that people would, often our academics were working together, but not actually shouting too much about it. And equally helpfully within the mapping work, there was a clear appetite to do more, which gave us then the platform to take the civic agreement forward. And lastly, we went out and talked in these early stages around stakeholder engagement, and particularly did the stakeholders think it was a good idea we did this. And I think very helpfully and overwhelmingly they said, yeah, we absolutely want to see the two universities working closer together to further the local area. So we developed a range of outputs, and as I say, most of the outcomes on that of that work is on our website. What emerged from that were 5 themes of activity that we then needed to go out and test with people, including our own university leadership teams to start off with. Some were relatively straightforward in terms of you'd expect us to be interested in economic development. Some areas were potentially areas of quite significant challenge, like educational opportunity. And there was quite a discussion as to whether we felt we could really contribute significantly to that. If you could move the slide on, please. Then it was a question of kind of testing where we got to in terms of evolving the 5 themes. And we did that basically by trying to take people's views on how they reacted to that themes. We did this actually based on a fairly large pre-launch event which took place in January 2020, where we brought, and well, we invited, and fortunately lots of people came to a large event that we ran in the centre of Nottingham, and basically asked people to listen to what we'd found in our work and then react to what we were starting to develop as the themes. And that was really a helpful event. It brought people together. It put the Universities for Nottingham brand on the map. And basically that then allowed us to do some further work around both internal exploration of the themes and priorities, and also some external discussions. And there we started to develop the outline consultation synthesis document, which was a key document for us. It was the document that actually started to set out what needed to be done and what the universities could do. You could move that on. Not sure what's happened to the slide there, unfortunately. It seems to have come out in white. That's not very helpful. But anyhow, let me tell you what the slide should say to you. So what I was going to say then was that then COVID came, and actually in many ways COVID was a disruptor, but also because it meant that the two universities needed to increasingly work together in terms of our reaction to COVID and how we were going to play on this. It was absolutely a blessing that we had done this work together leading up to COVID, which of course we weren't anticipating coming. And actually there was a large amount of joint working on our response to COVID that I don't think could have been done as slickly and as well if we hadn't already started this process. I think the second thing was that we made a decision not to stop our work in terms of developing the civic agreement for COVID. We paused it slightly and then decided we needed to get this done because COVID was going to play quite a significant role in our work. So we decided to press on, and what we did was, with the help of some external support, ran a whole range of one-to-one interviews, a whole range of workshops for our with our main partnership group, and we continue to develop and evolve the synthesis document such that ultimately we were able to develop a very clear picture in terms of what we thought the themes of activity would be. One of our challenges was, in terms of trying to construct the civic agreement, was what to put in and what to leave out. It's sometimes very easy to jump in on the we must solve all the big problems, but actually in reality the resource that we have and some of the stubbornness of these things makes that very difficult. So within our agreement we blended a series of big, what I call move the dial projects, and we linked that a little bit to some stuff that we were doing but we needed to do more, and we developed very clearly a COVID theme for this type of activity. And that wasn't to say that actually there wasn't a lot of other work going to go on. So our agreement doesn't delimit what we do. It very much provides the platform to allow lots of other things going on. And very, very clearly, One of the things we've learned from this is that actually the academics now don't seem to feel that they need to ask permission anymore to work together. There's a very, very, very clear mandate that if you want to involve conversations with each other, then please do. There's nothing to stop you. So basically, we negotiated the arrangement. We brought in the partners. The partners agreed with us what the main elements of our first civic agreement would be, and delightfully, we were able to sign that off with a huge amount of effort by the end of July 2020. And then the hard work began. So I'll hand back over to Fiona.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for taking us through the work up until July, when the agreement was signed. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about what we've been doing since July, before handing over to Tim to talk us through the NHS perspective. So mobilisation. So the things that we've been doing very rapidly since the agreement was signed: establishing the governance arrangements, and then programme planning and management. I'm mindful of time, so I won't go into those things in too much detail, but in effect, the Leaders Forum is the senior colleagues from all of the signatory partners, which you'll see along the bottom of the slide, and we'll talk those through in a future slide. So the leaders and chief execs very much looking forward, looking at policy alignment and future planning for the civic agreement. The programme management board, sort of senior leaders, sort of, if you were looking at local authority, perhaps service manager level, very much at the engine room of delivering the civic agreement, chaired by Professor Nigel Wright, our Deputy Vice Chancellor, and his equivalent at the University of Nottingham. And then initially, with us being, with the civic agreement being new, we did set up a shadow board, which was just the universities, just so that we could iron out any sort of early stage teething issues around our collaboration. And we've only met once, and I'm pleased to say we perhaps won't meet again as a shadow board. And then into the development of work plans around each of the 5 themes, and I'll share those themes with you shortly. Very strong, Mike mentioned earlier, around communications, so making sure that we're developing a communications plan, and then working on how we're going to measure and monitor the progress of the agreement, and of course evaluation will play into that as well. Paul, could you move us on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So on the right, what we have here are the 5 themes. We've kind of mentioned them in passing. But you'll see economic prosperity, educational opportunity, health and well-being, environmental sustainability, and then the 5th one, what we've called unlocking the universities. And as colleagues will know, we're complex, large organisations, difficult to navigate, sometimes difficult to access. So there's a theme around how we can unpack that. Each of those 5 themes contains a number of initiatives that are actually in the agreement, and the agreement's on the University of Nottingham website. There are 14 initiatives in all. And down the left-hand side, I don't need to read out all of the partners, but in addition to the 2 universities, they are the signatory partners to the UFN Joint Civic Agreement. Paul, may I ask you for the next one, please? Thank you. So the timeline, the key point we really wanted to make here is that it's not a quick thing. You'll see here that we've been working on this together since September 2018, and all of those stages took us through to July 2020 when the agreement was actually signed. And really a point Mike mentioned earlier as well, to strengthen the importance of these relationships working at each level within the 2 universities initially, in order to complete that pre-work before we engaged stakeholders more widely. Thanks, Paul. The next one, if you could. And I'm going to hand over to Tim Geiler now, Deputy Chief Executive of Nottingham University Hospitals Trust, to take us through this slide. Thank you, Tim.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting me along. So, I mean, from a health side of things, just firstly to reflect back to something that Mike said, you'll probably not be surprised to know that as well as politics between universities, there's politics within health. and there's also politics in local authorities. And I think one of the things for me about the power of this work that I've seen in Nottingham is it's drawn people together around a common cause and recognising that at the end of the day we all serve populations, and they might not be entirely coterminous and exactly the same, but there's a huge amount of overlap between the populations that we serve. And so what this started to really strongly articulate and get a broad understanding of is how much opportunity there is for us to do even more for the populations we collectively serve through thinking, working together in a different way. And certainly for me, the work that was done from the universities, and particularly the joint economic, social and cultural study, was a massive catalyst to that to that discussion and to that opening of awareness, but I think across organisations. So just briefly talking through a couple of these points. On the left, it may be something that many of you have seen before, which is just a picture of the things that contribute to determinants of health for population. And this has been talked about in health circles for a long time. We haven't been very good at actually practically really embracing it and doing something different about it. And the narrative still goes that only 20% of the determinants of health for a population are actually influenced by health and care services. The vast majority are through other things. And so within all of your areas at the moment where you might be thinking about this, health is starting to work in STPs or ACSs, so either sustainability and transformation partnerships or integrated care partnerships, where health and care services are being required to come together to work in a much more collective way for population outcomes. So this is back at the forefront of the agenda, and people are starting to really talk about how can we work differently together. So one of the things that this work has been is opportunistic for us all in terms of timing, to both be driven by the work the universities have done together of what the impact could be. At the same time, there's a very strong health agenda around it. The document in the middle at the top, if it's one that people aren't aware of, it's accessible online. There's a 5-minute read about it, and it's a case study about some work that's been done in New York about understanding and caring for the population in different ways. A very powerful article. And when I personally read it, it starts with a very brief description of somebody taking a tube journey under New York, and just as they go station by station, being aware of the state of the population that they're going through in terms of wealth, in terms of health, in terms of mortality and morbidity. And it really opened my eyes as my drive into work as to what I was actually passing through. And what I think it really reaffirmed was what a significant need there is in collective populations that we serve. And then through the work the universities have started to lead, what a significant opportunity we have to do something so much more impactful than what our unremitting efforts are currently, but they're separate efforts, and they're not coming together in the way that we could do. And certainly as we move into recovery coming out of COVID, we are really going to have to think and do something different to move to where we need to be. On the right hand side, there's a document that's recently been brought out by the Health Foundation, which starts to talk about the role of anchor organisations or anchor institutions, and was challenging the NHS to understand what its contribution could be. Being frank, the NHS has probably never really appreciated what its opportunities could be out with its normal look at providing ill health services day in, day out. So I think, you know, the millions of healthcare interventions that happened every single day, there's some fantastic stuff that goes on. But equally, there is so much more as large anchor organisations within populations that we could play. And again, the awareness of this information coming out at a time that the university colleagues had started this civic initiative was very timely to start to increase that awareness and also give us a platform through which to do it. And in terms of catalysts, it's already been mentioned, and probably no more timely day than in terms of COVID vaccination starting today, and incredibly proud in Nottingham that's starting as well today. COVID's really opened our eyes, hasn't it? And it's challenged a lot of the things that we do. And coming back to those populations, I mean, one of the things that becomes very aware is we have the equivalent of a small town arriving and leaving Nottingham each year through our student population. And obviously so much work is now having to be going to doing that safely, but then you become so much more aware that that actually happens, and then you become so much more aware in what actually the contributions to Nottingham and Nottinghamshire and the civic side of things are as a result of that. sometimes it takes things like this to help us understand things differently, doesn't it? And then I suppose, you know, we also become more aware from this in terms of what expertise lies locally and that we've never perhaps drawn on. I probably don't need to say much more than GVT from a Nottingham perspective for people to think about some of the people we might be thinking about here. And equally, at our hospital, we have the chair of the Joint Commission for Vaccination and Immunisation, which is setting all the priorities for the vaccines. One never really probably appreciates how much expertise lies on the doorstep and how much opportunity there is to really collectively impact for those populations that we collectively serve until there is this kind of capital, this kind of insight. And I think, you know, I'd just leave it probably by saying that the work that has been led by the universities has opened all of our eyes and challenged us to think differently around what could our collective achievements be if we work together differently and if we understand together the opportunities that are there. And it's great, we're just at the forefront of it, and really, really keen to be an active player alongside the rest of our colleagues taking this forwards. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Tim. I'm just going to reflect a little bit on some of the lessons learned. I'm mindful of time. I think that you can see the list on the slide. I think the key things I would really flag up are that each civic agreement will be different. It'll be unique to your university or universities and the stakeholders with whom you collaborate. I'd emphasise personal relationships and that they need to work at each level within the university or universities and your stakeholders as well. And the other thing I would say is that the time, everything takes longer than you think, and you see that our journey has been almost 2 years, and that was starting from a relatively strong base as well. So just on to the final slide, if we may, Paul. Thank you. That one's for some reason our text hasn't shown on that, but I'll share the content of the slide with you briefly. I think what we really wanted to stress is COVID has united us around a common goal in terms of student return, in terms of future economic prosperity and health and well-being, the things that we've said today. And that's really emphasised the importance of us working together as a wider partnership around a common set of criteria, that being the content of the joint civic agreement. The other thing just to mention is that in June next year, we're planning a showcase event to set out the things we feel we've achieved, but also the things that we would like to do moving forward for check and challenge from our wider group of stakeholders, those that came to our sort of January conference, of which we perhaps have at least 50 different stakeholder organisations who are still involved and vital to the success of this work. So Paul, that concludes our formal presentation. If I could hand back to you.